Australia, land of sunshine, shrimp on the Barbie, and emu warfare? You heard right, mate. In 1932, the Australian Army declared war on the emu. Not just any emu, mind you. 20,000 of the feathered fiends. It's a story so ridiculous it has to be true. Imagine this, soldiers with Lewis guns, the pride of the British Empire, facing off against a mob of flightless birds. It sounds like a Monty Python sketch, but I assure you it happened. And the emus? Well, let's just say they weren't exactly quaking in their feathery boots. The trouble began after World War I. The world was trying to recover from the devastation, and Australia was no exception. The government, eager to repopulate and develop the vast lands of Western Australia, offered returning soldiers a chance to start anew. These soldier settlers were given plots of land to farm, a fresh start after the horrors of war. Soldier settlers eager to start a new life flocked to Western Australia. They were filled with hope and determination, ready to transform the rugged landscape into productive farmland. With dreams of prosperity, they set to work, clearing the land and preparing it for cultivation. They cleared land, planted wheat, and waited for their fortunes to grow. The fields stretched out under the vast Australian sky, promising a bountiful harvest. The settlers toiled day and night, their sweat and labor turning the soil into fertile ground. What they didn't expect was an invasion of epic proportions. Just as the wheat began to sprout, a new and unexpected enemy appeared on the horizon. The settlers were unprepared for the sheer scale of the onslaught that was about to descend upon them. 20,000 emus, driven by drought, descended upon the farmers' fields like a feathery plague. These large, flightless birds, native to Australia, were on the move, searching for food and water. The lush wheat fields were an irresistible attraction. These weren't your average backyard chickens. Emus are enormous. Standing up to 6 feet tall and weighing over 100 pounds, they are formidable creatures. Their powerful legs can cover great distances quickly, and their sharp beaks and claws make them a force to be reckoned with. They can grow taller than a man, outrun a horse, and their speed and agility make them difficult to catch. The settlers watched in horror as the emus moved through their fields with ease, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. And kick with the force of a small kangaroo. They gobbled up crops, trampled fences, and wreaked havoc on the carefully tended fields. The settlers' dreams of a prosperous harvest were quickly turning into a nightmare, and generally made life miserable for the poor farmers. The emus were relentless, and the settlers' efforts to fend them off seemed futile. The once hopeful and determined settlers were now faced with a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Something had to be done. The settlers, desperate for a solution, turned to the government for help. Meetings were held, and plans were discussed. The emu problem had become a national crisis, and the government knew they had to act swiftly to save the settlers' livelihoods. Desperate times called for desperate measures. The farmers appealed to the government for help, and the government, bless their souls, sent in the army. Leading the charge was Major GPW Meredith, a man who took his orders very seriously, even if those orders involved waging war on birds. Armed with 2 Lewis guns, capable of firing 500 rounds per minute, Meredith and his men set off to combat the feathered foe. They ambushed emu gatherings, hoping to mow them down. But there was just one problem. Emus are surprisingly hard to hit. You see, emus may not be military strategists, but they're masters of survival. As soon as the guns started blazing, the emus scattered. They broke into smaller groups, using their speed and agility to dodge bullets. It was like trying to herd cats, only these cats were 6 feet tall and could disembowel you with a well-placed kick. The soldiers, used to fighting humans, not feathered ninjas, were completely outmatched. They managed to kill a few emus, but for every one that fell, a dozen more seemed to appear. The emus, it seemed, were winning. Section 5, Retreat. The emus claim victory. After a few weeks of this avian absurdity, Major Meredith admitted defeat. The emus had proven to be more than just a nuisance, they were a formidable opponent. Despite the soldiers' best efforts, the emus' speed and agility allowed them to outmaneuver the military at every turn. The soldiers, armed with machine guns, found themselves unable to keep up with the birds' erratic movements and sheer numbers. The Great Emu War, as it came to be known, was a humiliating loss for the Australian Army. What was intended to be a quick and decisive operation turned into a prolonged and embarrassing campaign. The soldiers, who had faced human adversaries in World War I, were now being bested by flightless birds. The emus, with their keen survival instincts, had turned the tables on their would-be hunters. The soldiers retreated, their tails between their legs, leaving the emus to claim their hard-won victory. The retreat was not just a physical withdrawal but also a symbolic one. It marked the end of an ill-fated mission that had cost time, resources, and morale. The emus, on the other hand, continued to roam the Australian outback, seemingly unfazed by the military's efforts. The emus' triumph was widely ridiculed in the press. Newspapers across the country seized the opportunity to mock the government's failed attempt to control the emu population. The story of the Great Emu War quickly spread, capturing the public's imagination and becoming a topic of widespread discussion. The newspapers had a field day, of course. Journalists and cartoonists alike found endless material in the absurdity of the situation. The image of soldiers being outsmarted by birds was too good to pass up, and the press milked it for all it was worth. Headlines like "Feathered Foe Outwits Army" and "Emu General Outmaneuvers" Meredith were splashed across the front pages. These sensational headlines captured the public's attention and added to the growing sense of ridicule surrounding the campaign. The Great Emu War became a national joke, a source of endless amusement for the Australian public. People couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. The idea that a group of soldiers, armed with modern weaponry, could be outwitted by a flock of emus was simply too ridiculous to believe, a symbol of government incompetence. The failed campaign highlighted the disconnect between the government's intentions and its ability to execute them effectively. It became a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of underestimating nature and overestimating human capability, and the unpredictable nature of Australian wildlife. The emus, with their resilience and adaptability, had shown that they were a force to be reckoned with. The Great Emu War served as a reminder of the challenges posed by the natural world and the limits of human control over it. Section 6. If you can't beat 'em, pay to shoot 'em. But the war wasn't over for the farmers. The emus, emboldened by their victory, continued their reign of terror. So the government, in their infinite wisdom, decided on a new tactic. If you can't beat 'em, pay to shoot 'em. They introduced a bounty system, offering rewards for every dead emu. Farmers, eager to protect their crops and earn a few quid, grabbed their rifles and joined the hunt. But the emus, it seemed, were made of tougher stuff. They continued to thrive, their numbers barely dented by the onslaught. Section 7. The Legacy of the Great Emu War. The Great Emu War may seem like a hilarious footnote in history, and it is. But it's also a story about the unexpected challenges of settling a new land. It's a reminder that nature, even in its most ridiculous forms, can't be easily controlled. Today, the Great Emu War is a beloved legend in Australia. It's a story told in pubs, around campfires, and even in classrooms. It's a reminder to never underestimate the power of nature, and to always be prepared for the unexpected. Section 8. A reminder of the power of nature. The Great Emu War, for all its absurdity, highlights a crucial point. It reminds us that nature often has the upper hand. We may build cities, clear forests, and try to bend the world to our will, but ultimately, nature plays by its own rules. The emus, in their own way, taught us a valuable lesson. They showed us that even the most advanced technology and military might can be no match for the resilience and adaptability of the natural world. Section 9. Conclusion. A war story for the ages. So the next time you hear someone say that history is boring, tell them about the Great Emu War. This was no ordinary conflict. It was a bizarre and almost surreal chapter in history that took place in Australia in the early 1930s. The Great Emu War was a unique event where the Australian government found itself in a peculiar battle against a large population of emus that were wreaking havoc on farmlands in Western Australia. Tell them about the time the Australian army went to war with a bunch of birds and lost. Yes, you heard that right. The emus, with their speed and agility, managed to outmaneuver the soldiers and their machine guns. Despite the military's best efforts, the emus proved to be formidable opponents. The soldiers, armed with Lewis guns and trucks, found it nearly impossible to get a clear shot at the fast-moving birds. It's a story that proves that truth is often stranger than fiction, and that sometimes the most unexpected events can become legendary tales. The Great Emu War is a perfect example of how nature can sometimes outsmart human ingenuity. The emus, with their natural instincts and survival skills, managed to evade capture and continued to thrive in the Australian outback. And that sometimes the best way to deal with a difficult situation is to just laugh. The Great Emu War has since become a humorous anecdote in Australian history, a reminder that not all battles are won with brute force. It's a story that brings a smile to people's faces and serves as a light-hearted lesson in humility. And who knows, maybe somewhere in the vast Australian outback, the descendants of those brave emu warriors are still out there, feathers ruffled, ready to defend their territory from all comers. The emus have become a symbol of resilience and adaptability, thriving in an environment that can be harsh and unforgiving. The story of the Great Emu War is a testament to the unpredictability of life and the surprising turns that history can take. It's a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories come from the most ordinary places. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation about history, don't forget to mention the Great Emu War. It's a story that's sure to captivate and amuse, proving that history is anything but boring, ready to defend their territory from all comers. The Great Emu War may have been a peculiar and somewhat comical episode, but it also highlights the complex relationship between humans and nature. It's a story that continues to fascinate and entertain, a true war story for the ages.